Ready to go. So thanks, Lila. Hi everyone. Welcome to the last day of Creative Week. You can hear a smile in my voice. It's not because but it's what the media team is bringing to today is talk about what creative media and what we potentially bring to and business through our programs. So it's going to be Kelly going to so I
Yep,
will hand it over to you guys if you want to do a real quick introduction, and then we can jump in. And tell me when you
sure,
want to advance, please.
sure. You could run the animation if you'd like.
Okay.
I'm Richard Jameson. I oversee the media practice here at TMP. And it was exciting to put this together. I work with Kelly and Shannon in the media group here in the US.
I'm Kelly Felston. I'm our head of performance here in the US, overseeing all the media people working in platform and making our media campaigns come to life.
And then I'm Shannon. I am one of the media planners. I was on Involve, but we transitioned to other accounts, but that's we also have media buys that will go over and stuff.
Cool. We're excited to talk to you all today. You can advance.
Maybe.
So we're going to be covering
There we go.
kind of cool new creative media executions. We'll get into it, but just real quick kind of view on this screen. Do you notice a difference, right? Clearly, one of these is super high impactful. It can't be missed. And another one on the right is pretty small, kind of hard to tell. Is there really any branding going on here? And I think, unfortunately, a lot of times with the creative, the media placements that we put in the market and have the utmost scale are those ones on the right. So kind of the 300 by 250s, the 728 by 90s, the more standard sizes. But obviously, the more impactful we can be, the more breakthrough we can be with our messaging. You can go to the next slide. And capturing attention, as we know, is really harder than ever. The average American sees 4,000 to 10,000 ads each day, which is kind of a mind-blowing fact. So how do you notice any of them, to be honest? And 86% of consumers experience banner blindness or even pay money not to see advertising, right? That's a whole nother thing we're being challenged with. So it's really all about finding creative ways beyond standard units to engage, break through, boost attention, engage, call, and so on and so forth. So there's a few sort of definitions we want to lay out here before we kind of jump into the details. There's rich media, which some folks have thought anything that kind of moves and expands is rich media, but really it's anything that's just has advanced features such as an animation, video, or audio, but it doesn't necessarily expand outside of the banner. So as you all probably know, a static banner is just that. It's static. There's no movement. It's just a JPEG type file. And then what's a little different is a high impact. So the difference between those two is rich media is kind of the movement, the animation. High impact is much more attention grabbing. So it includes rich media, but it really has a larger canvas. So think of skinning of a website or something that's like interactive or a QR code on a connected TV ad. And then even beyond that, there's interactive ads. So those that encourage some form of interaction. So not just a click, but going in, requesting a lead, requesting a quote, watching various videos, carousel units and social, things like that. So there's sort of 3 levels of interactivity or high impact. Interactive being kind of the most engaging, rich media being kind of that first step. We can go on to the next slide. And it's really in the numbers. So just from an engagement perspective and a performance perspective, high impact, rich media, and interactive content really do just outperform standard banners night and day. folks like high impact ads more, which is great, right? We want everyone to like our advertising and our messaging. CTRs perform far better when there's a video or audio or something for folks to kind of engage with. And then the more interactive an ad, the more engagement, not too surprising. So in kind of this crowded media space we're playing in the competitive space, and knowing that really all of the clients we work with want to break through and sort of be a challenger brand in a lot of spaces, this is really kind of the first step and almost must have in order to break through is bringing in as much rich media and high impact content as possible. And I will pass it over to Kelly to talk about all the ways we can measure things like this.
So I think, yeah, you can go to the next one. So I think when a lot of times we talk about clicks, right? When we're talking about our advertising and performance, but we want to keep pushing more towards different types of metrics. And when we're running a lot of these high impact, rich media placements, there's so many other metrics that help us tell the story of what's really going on with those ads. Because I think there's some stat, it's like less than 1% of people click through ads or something like that. And we know that our advertising and marketing has an impact, but it's not always measuring by the click. So these are some of the different metrics we can actually measure. And I think a lot of these are even probably new to people, or things that we don't talk about enough. Things like viewability and time in view. That's a good indicator that somebody is actually seeing our ads, and that's just one step. Things like social shares. So when we're running LinkedIn and Meta campaigns, how many people are actually sharing our posts? And I don't think people think about that, but people actually will share actual content that comes from ads and placements we have on those platforms. Video is a big one. Video is one that we continue to want to drill in of the power of video, whether it be in your standard banner size ad or taking over your CTV placement on your entire TV at home. There's things like video interactions, which we'll show you some of those, but some other good ones that we measure are video views. So how many people are actually viewing our video? How many people are actually completing that video? Then we can kind of start to optimize, like, is our 6 second, is our 15 second, is our 30 second really getting the most interaction? Are we getting our message across in the first 15 seconds of a 30 second? Because we know a lot of people aren't really completing that. So these are all just different metrics that can really help tell that. Some other really cool ones, I think, are things like scroll depth. So we'll show you some of the kind of like custom content partnerships we've done with like a Forbes and like a FAR for some of our Globus placements, where they'll actually provide reporting that shows, like, on that large article, like how long did people scroll, how much time were they staying on that content, how much percent did they get through that, and things like that. Hover rate's an interesting one too. We can actually see on some placements, like, how long did somebody actually hover their mouse over that specific ad. And QR code scans, that's one that's getting more popular, especially in the CTV space. And it is actually amazing how many people actually will get out their phone and scan the QR code on a TV. So this is just a little snippet of some of the different metrics that we want to keep pushing and make sure that we're incorporating when we're talking about performance, when we're talking about creative, when we're talking about reporting, to make sure that we're considering all these factors and not just really, talking about clicks and click-through rate when we're looking at stuff.
So let's jump into some cool ads and placements. So out of home has become really interesting. I look at it as no longer a static medium. There's digital billboards really everywhere you go. Every major city has them. You have access to them, and there's been some really unique sort of developments around the technology. So you can actually measure what mobile phones are passing by a billboard and see like real-time impression information. You can have digital billboards that sort of respond to time of day things or weather. And I think it's really an interesting use case for a lot of our clients, because there's events and things that folks want to surround. So we've been able to tap into the power of airport advertising or digital billboards on the way to and from events. And then of course, there's always going to be sort of your traditional static billboards on a highway that you can place near a competitive office, which is I've done in the past, can be kind of interesting. But I think from like this use case, we brought the Alteryx message to the airport while folks were kind of traveling to an event. And it's just a nice way to kind of reinforce reinforce the messaging and just make a brand feel maybe bigger than it would if you were to do a full national buy, right? You can get really localized without a home and really targeted. And one of the ways you do that, there's also, you guys might be aware, there's a Captivate network, which you can do in-office advertising. So actually in elevators and kind of in lobbies, and you can actually give this vendor a list of kind of your top targeted accounts. They can essentially create like a ABM targeted list of buildings where they have the highest propensity of your audiences, and then you can serve ads directly into those buildings, targeting like your most important customers. So that's really cool. I've also done it before where maybe like if a client or if there's a big sponsored event and you want to be around it, you can surround it with like street furniture outside in New York City, kind of surrounding events. So maybe you're not the one sponsoring the event, but your message is right outside of it. So it's kind of a nice kind of conquesting guerrilla tactic. And then of course you've got your sort of really high impact out of home you could use for a launch of a campaign, an IPO, or there's always like really big kind of super large engaging formats on the side of buildings and things. So out of home is like obviously super captivating, and I think when it's used in the right way, it can make a brand feel really big and stand out. But also like you need to just be smart with where it is you're using it, because if you're going to try to run out of home in, I don't know, Los Angeles, for example, it's very easy for things to get lost in the shuffle because there's billboards every mile on the highway. So we think out of home has a bright future, and with the advanced targeting capabilities that have come out, we can start using it more and more for like a B2B targeted campaign.
And I think a good thing just to add on there too, in terms of like cost, I think sometimes we think, okay, billboards, right? We have to do big buys. They're going to be really expensive, but that's really not the case. Like Rich was saying, like when we get really targeted, we can actually do we can work within pretty, what we might think is smaller budgets, but with the targeting we can do, really focus those and be able to create more of that experience, pulling off the digital off of your screens and getting in people's faces when they're going about their days.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's programmatic, you can, in some spaces you can bid, and yeah, there's efficiencies in the cost. And one really cool thing, like with the Captivate example, you can actually retarget folks on desktop or mobile that are in those offices and showing up on those IP addresses. So there's interesting ways to kind of create sort of a full brand story around like them, like someone being in the office and seeing a client's ads multiple ways. All right, we can go to the next one. All right, audio. So audio, all the rage right now. Everyone loves their podcasts, Spotify. But I think really what it is in the audio space, it's finding the right balance of scale versus high impact. So things like standard audio assets, your 15s and 30s, are obviously quite, I don't know, they're not easy to execute, but they're sort of the standard size. Everyone knows them. And you can really sort of run these anywhere within sort of a Spotify music, free paid music channel, or within a podcast. You can also run companion banners and videos alongside them for additional messaging. But on the flip side of that, it's lower impact and it's more skippable, right? Like I know if you're listening to a podcast, it's pretty easy to just kind of skip past those pre-recorded assets. The further down we go on this chart, there's lower scale but more customization, and higher impact and less skippable. So what I mean by that is when you get into a host read script, for example, those are what's considered live reads or pre-recorded assets across streaming music and linear. That would be something like this podcast brought to you by client X, who's changing the B2B game by whatever. Those are a little bit more integrated into the show, and they're not necessarily sitting in an ad pod, like a 60-second or a 2-minute ad pod where a user can like easily jump through them. So they're a little more high impact, a little less skippable. And then my favorite actually is the product integrations. I worked on Airtable at my past agency, and we actually found podcasters who were using their product in the show. So we had the hosts and sort of the studio executives working on the show endorse the product within the show and content. So we had a segment where it was essentially talking about how their in-studio production team used Airtable's low-code platform to, I don't know, better produce the show, more quickly produce the show. I thought it was really cool. It was like a really nice kind of like integration of the product, the client product, into the actual show that listeners were listening to. Obviously, there's lower scale here because you really have to find like the right match, but a lot more customization. But it also offers the highest impact, and it's pretty much unskippable because a user's not expecting it, and it's a really nice kind of way to tie the show into the product itself. So we think audio is going to continue to grow, and it is becoming more and more measurable, which I'll get into in a little bit here.
And I think a good thing to remember too is I know sometimes we're like, well, we don't have audio assets. We don't have anything pre-recorded. Well, a lot of partners, especially when you're doing some of those standard ones, especially like in this Globus example, they didn't have anything pre-recorded on their end. But what we did was just write up a script, and then our partner that we worked with for this had multiple different voices kind of voice that script out, and we got to kind of cherry pick which ones we thought fit the best, or just that the client was very much aligned with, and then we could integrate those. So I think for a lot of these examples we'll go through too, there's different ways, and like efficiency is leveraging different partners and some of their either creative capabilities that we may not have, or like piecing things together that we can do, and we might not think we can, you know, build those things right away.
Yeah, great call out. All right, we can go to the next
Do you hear that? That's the sound of someone just like you taking
When
one
was the
small
last time
step
you
into
took
the
a
world
step,
with
a
Globus.
real
Go
step
beyond the
out-
Sorry.
Listen to those nice audio ads when you miss
Yep.
it.
Definitely high impact and memorable. I love it. Cool. And then connected TV, everyone's favorite. I know we're trying to move a lot of clients this way, and I think we've done some really great work with Globus across connected TV networks, not just on kind of your standard units, but bringing in this sort of engagement ad experience. This one here, you see examples of, there was an opportunity to scan a QR code, which is pretty cool. That was overlaid within the connected TV space, something you couldn't necessarily do in a linear fashion. But obviously some of the benefits of connected TV, just to sort of simply run them down, much more targeted, much more efficient. You can sort of create that big screen experience in the living room, or while someone's watching, you know, that more engaging content without sort of the linear TV budgets that you typically have to spend. And there's also a lot less wastage, right? So when you're buying linear TV, you're buying it on a demographic like women 25 to 54, adults 18 to 35. So you're sort of just buying this really broad demo, and you're hoping that this show sort of indexes better against this audience in this show. But with connected TV, we can get really targeted. We have a lot of really cool ad units here. We've run for Globus, the QR thing, and then we also ran this sort of interactive engagement ad you see on the bottom, where a user could actually kind of click through various stories around the Avalon cruise and sort of learn more directly from their couch. As you can see, pretty strong performance, interaction rate of just under 1%. So I think that's pretty solid. You know, almost 1 in 100 people that saw this ad interacted with it. That's pretty stellar. And a pretty high QR code scan rate. So we're pretty happy with that performance. And we continue to sort of test CTV and video on the Globus account quite frequently. So there's a lot of learnings we can share in that space. If you have any questions on sort of best practices with video.
And if you think about like the QR code scan rate, I think this is so interesting, because looking at that like 0.06%, that's kind of the average for a banner on a website for somebody to click through. But if you're thinking about this, that's somebody actually like pulling out their phone, getting their camera out, and actually scanning that QR code. So to see if we can drive a similar like benchmark, and there's a similar rate for that. The amount of behavior that goes into doing that, showing that intent, is just really great to see.
Yeah. Cool. So we kind of talked about each of these channels, connected TV, out of home, Spotify audio. I think it's just sort of important to also think about how we can tie these upper funnel creative media executions to more down or mid funnel KPIs. a lot of the questions we get from clients tend to be, okay, we're going to run video, but how does that deliver on my leads? Or how can I prove the value of out of home, so on and so forth. So these are just some kind of thought starters around how measurement can work. From an out of home market perspective, you can do things like expose versus control market tests. So for example, if you run an out of home campaign in the Austin DMA, the Nashville DMA has a very similar composition of audiences, a similar sort of level of folks in the market. And you can essentially look at, while my out of home was in market or audio or whatever it may be, was I seeing upticks in search, site, social activity, et cetera, in that market locally versus in the Nashville market. So sort of tying like a correlation between out of home being in market for this month versus not being in this other market for this month and seeing if there's a difference. That's an interesting way to kind of test the validity of out of home. From an audio perspective, there's a Spotify Pixel now that can essentially track actions on site. So if I'm in my Spotify app and I listen to a podcast and there's an ad for client A, and I've heard the ad, and then I later go to their website or interact with a web lead gen form or whatever, it's actually, you have the ability to track that and say that this person heard the ad on Spotify and then made this action. So that's really cool. Really tying like the exposure of the audio ad to the user behavior. So I think that's a nice sort of use case to prove the value of audio. And then CTV has probably the most trackability or sort of messaging repetition for users, in the fact that if you go on a homepage of a client or any sort of business, you can actually see on that Wi-Fi address has hit that homepage, and then you can target a user on their connected TV device with a brand ad. Really quite cool. So like if I was to go on mongodb.com on my desktop, the next time I log into YouTube or go into Hulu, I could be served a MongoDB video asset. And kind of the opposite way, if I was to view a connected TV ad that maybe I wasn't retargeted by, but it was just sort of the run of network and I was in the sort of audience that should see it and I was served the ad, then if I view that ad, I can be retargeted on desktop or social with maybe more of an engagement or more of a consideration level banner to sort of push me through that experience. So a lot of cool ways to kind of connect that connected TV experience or online video experience to upper and lower funnel activities, and create sort of like a nice messaging pattern to help move people down the funnel. Cool. And then last for me, and then I'll kick it over to Kelly. I think we've got some pretty strong case studies here around just the power of connected TV and also using multiple ad formats. So if you see here on the left, this is a user journey flow that shows basically how did a user, what did they see before they visited the Avalon site? So for those that just saw a display to start, which is fairly standard thing, to rich media to video, they had a 9.7 times lift on site visitation. But I think those that saw that CTV ad, which was that super high impactful sort of 30-second big message on the big screen, they had like buying away the most engagement with the site. So the earlier on we can get that kind of video up front in the user journey, the more we expect folks to convert and visit the site. And then on the right here, just some more figures. Those that saw video spent 2 times more time on the website, and they converted at 2x those that had not been exposed. So just some really powerful metrics to show why connected TV and these more rich media formats being shown to a user early in the journey are creating more engagement, more lift, and more powerful media plans.
I think the other note here too is just having a good mix of creative, because we can leverage partners in the AI of platforms to figure out what that mix is, right? So here for the partner we're working with for Avalon, we were able to give them all these different creative formats and let them use their platform to figure out, okay, what's going to make this work the best, and kind of do that for us in an AI fashion, leveraging their optimizations and things like that to really put more money right into that top one to say, okay, we're seeing a ton of site lift here. Like, let's kind of keep doing that rotation because we know that's driving the most engagement. All right, we're gonna start walking you through, and please, if anybody has questions on anything or wants to like talk more about some of these units, we thought we'd really just showcase a ton of different either high impact, rich media, things that are interactive to spark ideas and to kind of showcase what we can do in some of these different places. So these are some examples for an Alteryx campaign that we ran across a bunch of different partners. On the left-hand side there, and if you want to play that, I mean, you can see I think some of these high impact placements not only give you a larger canvas, but they give you ability to tell a story and include a lot of content that you might not be able to shove into there, right? If you were just working with a standard banner. It also gives users, right, that ability to be like, oh, I'm interested in maybe some of the use cases, and click around and see what they're interested in and just kind of amp up their likelihood to kind of clicking through or exploring more with what we're messaging to them. And on the right-hand side here, these are some other just very high impact, take up a lot of real estate ads, but kind of flow within the content for what the user is reading at that time. And then with some of these too is really interesting because with the targeting we did with this partner specifically, we had different takeovers on different pieces of content on their site. So one piece was like more targeted and content around being catered to like the C-suite. So we're able to make one of those more higher impact ads that talk specifically to the C-suite versus then we had another piece of the site that was more targeting to like IT decision makers. And we were able to cater that messaging to kind of see what they were knowing what they would probably be more likely to interact with and just testing to see what worked best for them. So interactivity on LinkedIn. We wanted to flag some of these somewhat newer placements, I would say, on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn has been really diversifying and allowing for a lot more, I'd say, customization and interaction on their ad format. So this one on the left-hand side is a document ad. And this is really cool. It's kind of an expansion of their lead gen ads. So what this actually does is allow a user to actually kind of scroll through the first couple pages of an asset and kind of tease them with what they're going to get in that experience. And you can also even customize those first couple pages. They don't have to even be necessarily like what the actual first few pages of that content are. You can kind of summarize a teaser and drive them through to a lead form, which I think, again, gives more real estate to what they're looking at. And just a better user experience if they're interested in what we're messaging them. And then on the LinkedIn conversation ads, so these used to be called message ads, but what this actually does, it's not, I wouldn't call it like a chat bot, but it's really kind of a user flow that is customized to what they're looking at. You can see there too in the text, you can even pull in dynamic things. So it's messaging more personalized to them with their first name. You can integrate things like company and then give them that user flow to kind of choose their own adventure for what they want to do. And then you can even drive them to the website or drive them to an asset download based on the experience that they're choosing through there.
And I think one thing to call out on LinkedIn, everyone's running on LinkedIn, obviously, and every time I pull competitive spending across competitors that clients have asked us to look into, everyone's in this space. It's really like, it's a crowded space. So the more we can do that breaks through things like this, the better. So I think it's really important to kind of beta test and do what's new on the platform, because otherwise messaging can get it lost in that overfished sea, I guess.
So a few examples here. So these are more of your standard ad space, but bringing in some of that interactivity to it. So that one you're seeing there, that's more of a carousel ad, and that allows the user to kind of scroll through to kind of see different messages and be able to interact with those. And you can even drive those different messages to different landing pages. I'm sure you've seen a lot of these, like if you're looking at, say, shoes, and they'll like drive you to a bunch of shoes, but this could be anything from different assets, different products and solution areas. That kind of gives you more ability then too with that audience, because maybe they're not interested in one thing. And if it was just that on a static banner, they'd be like, okay, I'm just going to pass through that. But maybe that second carousel ad, right, is something they're like, oh, that is very interesting to me. So giving you some more real estate and allowing them to kind of choose what they want to click on. And then that second one there is similar, but also like just rotates kind of text through it. So both of these formats too, these are ones I wanted to highlight because these are more templates even that we can use. So you don't have to build even this whole experience. Like that one in the middle there is like basically right, your like standard banner in the back. And then you can have like, you can put the text in there, but you can change that text out frequently if you want to be testing things and doing different things. So it's not necessarily like a full animated banner that the team has to create, and just giving some efficiency while bringing that engagement into the fold too. And then this one on the right-hand side, this one's cool. It actually kind of like automatically types in a chat, or I mean a search query, and then allows the user, if they want to actually click down and then create this cool rich media kind of takeover experience where again, you have a lot of real estate, incorporating video into their messaging, different things. So another cool way to just bring the user in. All right, long form content. I know I talked a little bit about this, but this one is a cool one, and we'll talk about a B2B example in a second too, but this was really awesome that we did for Globus. So we partnered with Afar, and this was it was a sponsored kind of page, but again, it's a very organic and very rich experience with a ton of content for somebody to actually learn all about what it's like to experience an Avalon cruise. So starting with kind of that big thing at the top, and if you want to, I think that's a video.
Yep.
We can play. So yeah, that user scrolls down, right? They're able to learn so much more about what the experience is like on an Avalon cruise, pulling in a lot of imagery and things like that. And then this is the coolest part. So these are interactive maps that were included for actually very specific cruises that you could go on with Avalon. So the user could choose like maybe what region or whatever interested them, and they can actually go in here and see different destinations and stops. They're going to get on that river cruise and explore all of that, and then click over to the site to learn even more there. And looking at some of the numbers here too, I mean, the page views, this engagement rate on this was incredible. And the clicks that actually like went over across the web page into the website, if we broke it down, it was a CPC of less than $5, which if you think about that for like this custom amazing experience, I mean, that CPC is so low and you get so much with it. So again, like being efficient with our dollars, but creating those amazing experiences is something that's really great to do.
Kelly, for comparison, do we have an idea of like what our search CPC would have been for something like this, or this category or product?
I would say like on, I mean, CPCs, I guess, range, but like a CPC like that would be more of like if somebody is searching maybe like a destination, maybe like a Europe river cruise, it could be something around that.
Cool.
But pretty similar, but I guess it's
great.
Yeah. All right, cool. This is so for ForcePoint a few years ago. So just to set, this was right around the time of the pandemic, and it was a really great time for ForcePoint because people were moving remote and companies really needed those solutions and offerings. And we were able to partner with Forbes to do this incredibly expansive and diverse mix of media across their website. Not only did we have the brand voice premium post, which is on the left at Afar experience, where it's a huge piece of content, learning more specifically about cybersecurity risks, really pulling in people who were in that mindset of needing to do that for their organizations. Within that too, we even had custom audio that was incorporated from ForcePoint C-suite level that talked about like what it's like for that remote experience and kind of talking more about the products and offerings beyond just kind of reading all the content on there. And this one too, so this is a good example of where, right, we wanted to make sure that we were driving impact to the bottom line too in one expansive buy. So there was even lead gen extension on this one. So like those who like went and read the article and fell within our target audience, we were able to expand across Forbes to then start promoting different assets to them and capture them as leads. And then we had some other really high impact units like that storyteller unit and just big pieces around very relevant content to our relevant audience across the website. So if anybody within our target was scrolling around Forbes for the time of this buy, they were seeing the Forcepoint brand basically everywhere they were going. And this whole buy too, just looking at everything we got here, I think we looked back and it was about $250,000 for all of those things, which is, I mean, an incredible expansive buy for just that price point. So this was a little bit more, I think, yeah, this one is the video that you can see kind of the experience of the rise in remote work, getting through all of the content. It's very organic, looks like just every other Forbes article that somebody would read on their website. And then having some of the voiceover from some of the C-suite over at Forcepoint, like I talked about, and just giving that full experience, which was great. These are just to showcase some cool mobile units. So this is called the Inner Scroller. These can be ran across a lot of different networks. I'm sure some of you have seen this, but instead of kind of just like scrolling through your content on your phone, right, you get this like cool pop open experience that you're going to see. And then, you know, you can swipe past it, but it takes over that whole screen for a little bit. And even incorporating things like video into there too. So making the user maybe stop, watch that video for a few seconds, but then be able to easily continue on with whatever content they're reading. And those are some examples that we've recently done for GXO, which have done incredible. You can see they have like pretty, you know, eye-grabbing messaging there. You can really consume that quickly and it gets their message across in that kind of full takeover experience. All right, now I'm going to talk about what I'm calling combining the pieces. So this is where we want to leverage our platforms and the ability to create efficiency in our messaging and creative process to allow platforms to pick and choose what's going to work best. So this example here is within Google and what they're calling now their lead gen ads, formerly discovery ads. But what we can do for these is basically provide the platform a bunch of different images, creative logos, messaging, and they take all of that and in whatever format the user is consuming their content across the network, they can take those pieces and kind of put them all together, right? So like for DoorDash on the right-hand side, you can see like that was just like a Gmail ad at the top, right? So they can take our copy and start to customize with the like headlines and messaging that we have in there catered to that. The other power of this too is however you set up your campaigns in terms of your KPIs and goals, the platform's going to optimize to that, right? So if you're running a branding campaign, they may be doing a different mix of messages and copy that's going to really provide the most reach. But if you're looking for leads, the platform's going to start to optimize to say, okay, this image we see is really like driving more people to the site and having them convert. So they're going to start pulling that together, like I said, and just making sure that like the dollars that we're putting are for the best creative that's going to drive to the end goal there. This is another example for Dish Network. And so this is like a native placement that we ran through our programmatic platform. And again, you can kind of see that same ad format, but just with different copy and just natively putting that into the content that somebody's reading. So you can see even they like change the font style so that it looks more organic into the post that somebody is looking at and things like that. So again, just kind of formatting to where that user is and making that best experience within what we have going. And another example, so this is Meta, Facebook, and Instagram. Similar story here, right? You can upload your images, your copy, and I think remembering that like these platforms will format all of those pieces and put them together in whatever type of way that user is consuming on, you know, their Meta, their Facebook, and things like that. So I think one of the messages there too is making sure when we're all talking together and starting to build creative and gathering specs for everything is giving the platforms the most variety in what they can do. So making sure we're including things like horizontal, square, and full vertical placements, right? So those verticals that you see like in the stories, we need to make sure we have the specs and the images kind of cut in that way so we can maximize that inventory. But you know, as long as we know those things and can give the platform all the pieces it needs, it gives it more ability to span out and also optimize, like I said, to our KPIs and goals. All right, personalization and dynamic formats. So this is one I know we talk about personalization a lot and trying to really cater our messaging and things like that. One thing we can do here again is like leverage platforms and different dynamic creative optimization tools to help us do that. So on the left-hand side here, this is for a client Onfido, and this was through Demandbase. And what Demandbase has the ability to do is actually pull in a user's company name. They can even pull in things like their industry based on different data they have when targeting. So like I went to this website and it served me up, and our former company 90 Octane, it knew I worked at 90 Octane based on my IP address and other variables, and was able to dynamically put my company name into the banner ad that served there. So it just gets more customized, right? I mean, if you see your company name on a banner, you're going to probably look at it, hopefully, because it captures your attention. You're like, whoa, how did they know that? On the top side there, these are dynamic creatives that we have run. So maybe not like the most beautiful banners, but these have worked in terms of pulling in different messaging and copy. So just having kind of that background, but the copy that's rotating within there changes dynamically. So again, that's where you put in like a bunch of different messages and headlines, and allows the platform to kind of optimize and pull in what is working best. And then you can get even more, you know, I'd say not manual, but like on the lower right-hand side, these were for some of our Boeing campaigns where they were very small account-based programs that were built out very customized to each of those airlines. So even incorporating the company name into those banners too drives up click-through rates and engagement on those. All right, testing. So we wanted to hit on testing because I think earlier this week we were in one of the presentations and we didn't really get to it. And I did want to make sure that we incorporated this on the media side and started to talk about testing and just different ways to think about it. There's so many ways we can test. I mean, just looking at this, right? You think creative first, but there's so many other ways to test. But I think starting with the creative, things like, you know, testing your messaging in there, testing CTA, testing color, those are some of the first things that you really go to. But I think when we're going through the testing process, it's kind of sitting down at the beginning and saying, okay, what are we trying to learn about what we're testing, right? I mean, there's so many different variables and things you can do. And I think starting to think about like, what is going to make the most sense? What's going to give us the most learnings about our target audience, what we're trying to do here? What can we learn and expand upon? So here's kind of like what we think, I'd say, is where to go with the testing process. Like I said, like starting with what you want to learn. Do you want to learn about, okay, I want to figure out what my CFO audience is going to engage with the most, and kind of saying, okay, we're going to start with that audience, right? And starting there, and then starting simple. So, okay, taking that specific audience, what kind of CTA are they going to interact with? Is it going to be a learn more? Is it going to be a see how? And making sure that you kind of have that very specific thing in mind, and you're really isolating one variable at a time so that we can actually assume at the end of the day that we know that that audience is truly responding with the CTA more. So that's where it goes into ensuring statistical significance. Often I see, okay, let's put a test into market, and a week later, we're like, well, what's working? Well, we need to let the numbers build up, and we need to be sure that we feel like statistically that that audience or that, you know, whatever we're testing is true. So I think sometimes, you know, we want to learn quickly, and we do learn as quickly as possible, but making sure we have things in market for the amount of time that they need to be so that we can really make a call on those. And then optimizing and iterating. So always like taking that learning and then saying, okay, what can we learn next from this? And just continuing to expand upon there. And this is similar to what I was just saying, but like expansion. So like starting with creative, thinking about different audience expansion. So like I said, maybe we could run one test at the same time. Like, what is our CFO audience? What CTA are they engaging with versus our CMO audience, and running those in tandem, knowing we have those like split audiences and a split test, but just different ways to think about how do we, you know, beyond just creative, we can think about the audience, we can think about the content within there and things like that. So yeah, Rich, you want to wrap it up?
Sure. Thanks, Kelly. Awesome creative ideas. I think just key takeaways, it's important to leverage the full creative media verse. We just coined that phrase, so you guys can use that if you want. So it's a multitude of formats beyond standard banners. They really are increasing every day. I mean, Kelly showed a lot of really cool examples and way we've used them for current clients. Targeting capabilities and ways for users to engage are constantly evolving. So I think kind of the testing point that Kelly was just mentioning, it's really important for media and creative to get together as soon as possible to kind of figure out what is it we want to achieve from a campaign and like what kind of creative will help deliver that, as well as these kind of unique media placements. Platforms can actually create multiple ad formats pretty easily. So the example of giving one asset to Meta, and then they can create kind of 7 or 8 different formats, or a native partner. And AI capabilities are helping do a lot of that work now with dynamic formatting and things. There's always new publishers, networks, and platforms entering the market, many with unique ad placements. So it's kind of on us to stay on the pulse and make sure we're bringing these ideas proactively to everyone. And I think lastly, audio and video are becoming a more common way to reach BDMs, and it is becoming more trackable, as I shared. But it's really important to be as effective with the targeting as possible and have the right creative in those moments of receptivity. So lots of cool stuff out there. We're really excited about all the things we can do, and we want to work together as best as we can to try to bring more and more of that kind of rich media, high impact content into our media plans with everyone here. So that's it for us. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks all. Are there any questions either in the room or on the chat? Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks all. We have one more session today at 1 o'clock, and thanks so much for joining.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Wow.